Welcome to the Non-Sequitur Show. Continual watching beyond this point may result in terminal face palming and a complete loss of wokeness. You have been warned.
Hi, welcome to the NonSequitur Show. I apologize for not having this on Wednesday, the original time it was scheduled to be. Things came up and I wasn't feeling very well. I haven't been feeling very well all month, but I am feeling better today. I am getting over whatever it is the hell that I had, which was sicky. I'm just calling it sicky, because I was sick for most of November for the most part, I think. But anyways, being sick, we think about things, right? I mean, we all know what it's like to be sick. We've all had that feeling like, oh my God, I'm dying here, right? Whether it be hyperbolic or not. But, all of us, especially with the pandemic, had to deal with a lot of death and dying in our lives. Myself personally, I've had a lot of death in the last couple of years with people around me. I mean, significant figures in my life have died, and even people that I've never met that I had a lot of respect for. Like my favorite drummer, Neil Peart. Passed away a while back. Steve McRae just passed away from Fleetwood Mac. People that we grew up with are passing away, and as you get older, you kind of look at the ephemeral nature of life, and that death is an integral part of it. Everybody will die. This is a fact. I mean, this is an inescapable metaphysical necessity that if you live, you will die. So I thought about kind of having an open discussion on this particular topic, talking about maybe a bit about philosophy of mind, talking about what it is to maybe die. Does the mind continue after death? I think these are all important topics. I was going to do it with Nikki 38. Unfortunately, she's unavailable right now. I would have liked to do it with her because I really enjoyed talking to Nikki. But show's got to go on, and I didn't want to postpone it again. So I am having it today. It is an open panel. If you wish to join, the link to join is in the live chat pinned to the top. So by all means, I'd like to get your opinions, especially from a theistic point of view and from a non-believer point of view of what happens when you die and what you think happens. I will be giving my own personal views, I think, on the particular topic. But, needless to say, one of the things that I had asked to the people that subscribe to this channel was what they think about happens when you die. Is the volume low? I don't think I have it all yellow, almost going into red. Do I need to trim my gain a little bit? I don't want to be too loud because I was too loud last time and my guests were, I think I was too low and my guests were too loud. But I'm going to turn my amp a little bit here. Is that better, Kimamaki? So, yeah, as you get older, the hearing starts to go. Now I'm overdriving and I don't want to do that. I can see it's red, so one sec. Maybe I can put the mic in a better position. How's that? So, let me know. Okay, so anyways, let me kind of just dive into this. Hi, Brandon. All right, so everybody else sounds fine. So let's kind of dive into this. So I had a vote that I had put on the NonSequitur Show, and it was pretty just straightforward. It was like, what happens do you believe after death? Give me 1 second here. All right. So there was a number of responses. There was 162. By the way, I do apologize for my lighting. The lighting is dark nowadays. I have a burned out light bulb. I can't get my ring light to work very well. We replaced this light, but it was just not bright enough. So I apologize for the poor quality of lighting, but you guys don't really need to see me anyways. You know what it look like. You don't care. You're here for the audio anyways. Most people just listen to this channel. They don't really watch it per se, which is how I watch most videos. I literally have been lately just putting on a video, and I'll put in my earpieces and just lay down and listen. I don't need any of the visual stuff, so that's kind of secondary to the audio. So hopefully the fact that I'm not in bright light doesn't really make a difference to the show at the moment. So 162 respondents on this particular question, which I found to be interesting because the vast majority of the respondents was on the question, does life continue after death? Does the mind exist without the brain? I think those are synonymous questions for the most part, right? I cannot see how you can extricate one from the other. If you're going to argue that life continues after death, I think that somehow entails the mind exists without the brain, right? There's a duality there of some nature. If people can argue otherwise, I'll be happy to entertain that, but I don't know how somebody can argue that there is some kind of life after death and not argue that the mind continues without the brain. So, assuming there's an entailment there, if yes, what is your reasoning? If no, what is your reasoning? I will get into that. There are some comments, not very many, but overwhelmingly, 3/4 almost, 72% said no. Now, I probably would imagine that most people watch this channel are non-believers. I do have a lot of theists that watch the channels. And I will say this right out of the get-go. I'm not bashing on Christians or Christian belief or life after death or anything like that. I will be talking about it, of course. But this is not to in any way attack people's personal beliefs. So it doesn't make that very clear. Because last time I had Nikki on, and Nikki and I, and if she can make it, then that'd be great, by the way. But last time I had Nikki on, we had talked about a chick track that had been dealing with some pretty messed up situations, things like child abuse and pedophilia and just wacky stuff. And of course, the Christian narrative from this chick track was, oh, well, you can be forgiven, but didn't seem to give a damn about the victim, which was this child. And so her and I talked about it, and all of a sudden, it was like, oh, look, Nikki and Steve are bashing on Christians. No, it was a very specific group of Christians we were bashing on, and it wasn't the fact that they were Christian. It was the fact that they didn't seem to care about the welfare of a child, merely that the person who was committing these atrocities against a child were somehow saved by saying that Jesus is Lord. I take umbrage to that. I think that is just makes no sense to me as far as any kind of ethical considerations. That if a person commits these atrocities and all of a sudden they say, hey, Jesus is Lord, forgive me, and all of a sudden, oh, you're okay. Yeah, I got issues with that. But that's a different topic. So, 72% said that they believe that there's no life after death. This basically, to me, implies annihilationism. Annihilationism is the belief, from a Christian point of view, that God annihilates you. In other words, you cease to exist. You have no longer any existence. The best way to describe that would be how you were before you were even born. You were non-existent. You were a non-entity. And there's some really interesting theories on identity and what it means to be identity and what it means to have a non-identity. Not going to get into them. I've talked about them on my Facebook page before, and I'm not really hip on them since then. I haven't really reviewed that topic. But there are some really interesting theories on what it means to have identity. Taking the Lead, welcome to Initiate. Thank you. Thank you, Taking the Lead. I appreciate it. If you want to become a member of the channel, that's great. I appreciate it. If you want to join the channel and get a nice, cool green name, that's wonderful. I will be doing shows this month. Like I said, I haven't been feeling very well, but I am feeling better. Hey, welcome back, Brandon. Can you hear me now? Are we good? I can't hear you now. Yeah, now I can't hear you. Brandon's having technical difficulties. But anyways, 15% said yes. Taking the Lead, number one fan, super sticker, $10. Thank you, Taking the Lead. I appreciate it. And I like your feedback on this particular episode. Again, this is probably not the direction I was really going to go initially, but I wanted to talk about it anyways. And, this is kind of a different way of doing Non Sequitur. Usually I'll have a guest. Usually we'll be talking about different topics. I haven't been feeling well enough to get guests, and I apologize for that. I did, try to make something happen with Nikki, but that didn't happen. So hopefully they'll still do justice just for me giving my opinion on certain things that people may want to listen to. And then, of course, no opinion either way, which would be agnostic. Yes, that's what agnostic means. It means to have no opinion, no belief either way, which is 14%, which is actually surprising. A lot of people don't have a position either way. So let's kind of go into the comments, because I thought the comments were interesting. The comments were basically your reasoning. So let's look at some of the reasonings. This person said, no consciousness is best described to me as an emergent property of structures that make up each human. Therefore, if the body is unable to sustain life, the consciousness dies with it. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, freaking stardust. Okay, this would be a naturalistic view. I do kind of think that consciousness is an emergent property. I tend to what's called non-reductive physicalism, which some people can agree with, some people don't. I think atheists can go either way on it. What that basically means is that if you're a non-reductive physicalist, that means you can't take mental states and reduce them down merely to physical states. And I think there's some good arguments as why you can't do that. It doesn't apply necessarily dualism. I do go towards what's called property dualism, which means that I do consider mental states and physical states to have their own properties, but either of one substance, called neutral monism, or just somehow of manifestations of the physical, but not completely reduced down to physical properties. It's an emergence. In other words, if you have like water molecules and you put a bunch of water molecules together, you're going to get the emergence of the property of the ability to be wet. Water's not wet. It is a wetting agent. But if you put all these molecules together with the hydrogen bonds, you're going to have this emergent property that comes out of it. And one way to describe this, I think, what he's talking about emergent property would be very similar to a dot matrix analogy. This is called necessary physicalism that he's talking about here. Necessary physicalism would basically be, suppose you have a picture that's comprised of just dots. The older people out there would remember what's called a dot matrix printer. You had something like 400 ppi, right? So these dot matrix printers, the higher dots per inch you had, the higher the quality of the image, right? The more dense the pixels were, the more dense the dots were, the better quality of the image, the more information you had in that particular image. But what comprises of that image is just a mere dots, right? There's no physicality of the image. There's no reality, ontological existence of that image other than just arrangement of dots. And that kind of relates to what's called mereological nihilism, where us as humans, the brain, is just a rearrangement of atoms, just called primitives. And somehow, because of that arrangement of atoms in the brain, we have some kind of consciousness develops out of it, some kind of mental states that come out of it, just like an image comes out of those dots, even though they're just dots. There's nothing more to them than just colored dots. But it raises the question that if you're a physicalist, right? If you are just somebody who believes that there's just physicalism and there's no mental states, or mental states are not somehow different than physical states, then an experiment you could basically do in your head called a Gedunken, experiment. If you had two images with the exact same dot arrangement, one would say that those properties of the images are the same, aside from the spatial-temporal relationship. Obviously, they're in different locations. But the properties of the image from one picture to another is identical if the dot alignment is exactly the same and the colorization is exactly the same. They're essentially indistinguishable from each other. If you do this with the brain, and you think that the brain is merely physical, that you should be able to, in theory, take a human brain, clone it exactly to the atomic quantum level, and have the same person, which means you have two people that are identical, consciousness-wise, based upon the physical substrate. Which, to me, it just seems non-realistic. I think that the consciousness seems to be more than just physical states, because if not, you could have infinite number of persons all with the same exact consciousness, right? The only difference would be after the point of cloning, whatever experiences you have, then you would have something that's new, right? But I believe we're basically a collection of memories and how we evaluate those memories. And so if the memories are exactly the same for two individual brains, they should be the same person. They have the same properties. But I like to think that I am unique, that I'm an individual, that I cannot be replicated in that way to have the same exact brain state. So I can't hold to just physicalism. Does that make sense so far? Is everybody on the same page? But that's what he's talking about in emergent property. He's talking about that the mental states are derived from physical states. And I still can't hear you, Brandon. And I don't know if it's on mine or not. Can you guys hear? You guys can't hear me either because I can't see the voice meter moving. Yeah, Brandon, nobody can hear you. I apologize. Excuse me. So anyways, that's what he's talking about there. So this response was that the mind doesn't live on after death, and that because it is emergent property, you just cease to exist, which is equivalent, in my view, of annihilationism. What?
You said shit. I heard him.
You heard him? Why can't I hear him? You heard him on the outside?
I heard him.
Can you help me?
Oh, I see him in the speakers. What the hell? Let me try coming back in the StreamYards. One sec. 1 second. Maybe it's just on my end. Entering studio. Okay, try now, Brandon.
Yes.
I can't hear him on my head. I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
I can see it on the outside, but I can't see it in my StreamYards here.
Yo.
I just see it moving. Anyways, Brandon, I can't hear. The outside can, but I can't. And I don't know what it is, so I apologize. That's because it's a problem if everybody who comes in I can't hear.
I can. I hear him well.
Well, yeah, but I can't though.
Problem.
I see him talking,
Yes, you
and I see
can.
a Starry Night from Van Gogh.
Yeah.
Brandon, try coming out and coming back in again. And
I've done it like 3 or 4 times.
oh wait. Here, talk. 1 sec.
Yeah.
1 sec.
Talk.
Keep talking. Just sing to me.
I don't sing.
All right, there you go.
All
right.
I can't sing.
I have a loose.
Can you help me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I have a loose connection.
Okay.
All right, that makes sense. All right. So, anyways, are you
Well, I
on
was
board with what I said?
There was an experiment on seizure patients where there can be 2 distinct people in one.
Well, yeah,
One that's an atheist and one that's
right.
religious.
Those are split brain experiments where you have different conflicting beliefs, right? But are they different entities? Are they different people?
What?
It seems like it's the same person. They are. But can you think you can have 2 different consciousnesses in the same brain? And if that is the case, again, it still relies on a physical substrate. And if it relies on a physical substrate, then the mind is not independent of the brain, and therefore the mind is dependent upon some kind of physical substrate.
Well, what's interesting to me is the interaction, the electricity between the neurons and the physical part, the interaction in there is what's interesting to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, I find it interesting
What
too.
makes
But
the electricity?
But if the electricity ceases and the physical brain is no longer there, 72% said there is no mind afterwards. There's nothing to continues. But to a religious person who believes in life after death, that somehow the consciousness is related to the soul, there has to be something that continues, and it raises the question: what is being continued? Right? Hi, Michael. How you been, man?
And I'm interested in the electricity itself too.
I'm good, Steve. Good to see you.
Yeah. So what is your take on this, man? Are you a non-reductive physicalist? Are you emergent property, which is, by the way, does fall under non-reductive? Do you believe that the mind continues after death?
So, that's a great question. It's really deep. I'm glad I tuned in for this, but I believe that the mind does not continue after death, Steve. I believe that actually there's a lot of symbolism biblically and stuff like that, but a lot of people will talk like burning hell and stuff like that, but Hades is actually symbolic, meaning like, and they discuss this, it's like everlasting sleep. So I believe that, once we do perish, that is it, I don't believe that we continue. Now, I get confused with this because, they say once energy is in motion, right, it continues to be in motion. Do I believe that there's a possibility that our energy can transfer and continue? Possibly, but I'm not certain, if that makes sense. I don't really know.
Yeah, see, I have an issue with that. See, I have no problem with the conservation of energy and mass, obviously. I did have a little physics background. But the problem is that energy and mass are still information. Information is conserved. Matter of fact, one of the most fundamental laws of physics is that information is conserved, it is never destroyed. Yeah. Now, we can have information about us that continues on. That doesn't mean we have mental states that have intentionality. Just because we have some kind of information about us that will be encoded, that is encoded right now in the universe. And I do believe in the holographic principle. So I believe that we are basically a 3-dimensional hologram based on 2-dimensional information that's on this celestial sphere, the Hubble sphere, the boundary conditions of the universe.
Didn't that only deal with black holes, though?
No, that's what holographic principle came from. I mean, that's what it originally arose from, was black hole theory. But we find that the holographic principle applies to any informational system. That the information in a system is directly proportional to the area of the system, which on the black hole would be on the surface area of the black hole. So we can say the same thing about the universe. The information encoded in reality is encoded on a two-dimensional boundary condition of the universe. So everything about us is in that encoding. But I don't know how the mental states are encoded. It can encode the physical states, but I don't know how the mental states are encoded, which again does kind of seem to argue against pure physicalism. But that doesn't mean that the mind continues on afterwards.
Well, electrical impulses continue when you're actually dead for a while.
Well, yeah, but at some point they cease, right? All the ion channels open up. You have no more potential difference on your sodium. And you have your sodium, potassium, calcium ion level, gates, right? These are basically gates, and they just open up. So you have no potentiality, and the brain just dies. You have brain death. Once you have brain death, there is no more consciousness. It just doesn't seem to be something that exists. And if it does, where does it exist? Now, they used to think that the consciousness had what's called the seat of consciousness, called the pituitary gland. We realize now that was complete nonsense. We don't know where the consciousness goes when you sleep. We don't know where it goes when you're in a coma. We don't know where it goes when you're under anesthesia. All we know is that somehow the consciousness is parameterized by the skull, the mind. It's somewhere localized. Like if I move from my location here and I go a mile away, my consciousness goes with me, right? It's somewhere localized in there, but it's not localized to the point where we can say, here's you, here's you, here's you. Yeah. But it does seem to be dependent upon the physical substrate.
You know, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but like when I think surgery, I went in for surgery recently, and this is probably the best example that we can, or the closest that we might be able to get. I mean, of course, there's debates like with DMT, stuff like that, exploring the consciousness. But, you know, when you are put under anesthesia, for instance, you know, it seems as if like no time has lapsed. But during that time, you know, where is your consciousness, right, when you're in that state? And I think that's kind of interesting, because when I was put under, I literally, you know, it's just like I kind of just woke up, as everybody says, you know. I mean, there are some people that say they see like this light or this or that. That's, I guess, a different topic. But as far as like being put under, I think that's the closest that we can get to trying to explore that.
Yeah, well, every time I've ever been put under, it happens in a blink of an eye. I literally will be counting down 10, 9, 8, 7. Oh, I'm awake again, right? There seems to be no passage of time. I do think time is relatively illusionary, but as you said, where does the consciousness go during that time period? You're no longer in existence. Matter of fact, some people argue that every time you sleep or you go unconscious, you're essentially, in an existential sense, dead. And that every time you come awake again, you're a whole new person, kind of like the ship of Theseus, you know, that Theseus, that you are a brand new person with new memories. And so if we are just a collection of memories, which I do think in some ways we have to be, we draw on a lot of memories. Matter of fact, the process of death and dying, a lot of people obviously have known family members. My dad had some things along these lines too, of Alzheimer's disease. Yeah, they lose their memories. They seem to be the person they were, right? My dad, during the last few, maybe months of his life, was not the same person that I grew up with. There were some fundamental changes in his behavior, his mental states, his acuity. It just didn't seem like him. And if what we are is basically our history, our memories, because that's what we draw on for inference. That's what we draw on to make our decisions, our moral decisions, our intellectual decisions. Everything that we do is based on the fact we have an understanding of information and memories. And if those memories no longer there, because either A, the chemical pathways are gone, or B, the map to those chemical pathways, which I believe in what's the hippocampus, because the hippocampus does that. I think the hippocampus maps to where these memories are.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, if that map goes away, then we don't have no idea how to even access these memories. But I've had recently memories that I did not even remember having. All of a sudden, I'm like, oh my God, I do remember that. And I hadn't thought about that in probably 30 years because I'm old.
Just snap back. I've had that happen.
Yeah, exactly. So I do think we are a collection of memories that have intentional states for some inexplicable reason. We're just memories that have intentionality. But why? Godless Girl, hey, welcome. This is kind of up your alley a little bit. You kind of like this stuff.
Yeah, I love talking about this stuff. I actually was learning from some of the stuff you said about physicalism. I've always wanted to get more clear on my position on that, because I don't really have a position on it.
Yeah. On what? On physicalism?
Like physicalism versus dualism and stuff. And then I'm not sure if I understand the non-reductionist physicalism or what, as opposed to the more radical one that.
Well, the radical one I think is called eliminative materialism.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a radical point of view. That basically says that everything we think we know isn't even what we know. It basically we're so confused. It's almost like theological cognitivism. Is that we're just on the wrong path when it comes to explaining mind-body problems in the mind and the brain. Somebody had mentioned in the live chat. I'm not ignoring the live chat. I'm trying to pay attention. But like, hey, No Plum, welcome. Isn't it past your bedtime? Yeah, you talked about Star Trek transports. We can get into that, but a lot of times people talk about death and dying. They always get into the Star Trek transport thing, and I think it kind of maybe detracts. I think you die, personally. I think you die when if Star Trek was real, you'd be dead. That's why I cannot believe that we're just physical states. If you replicated the brain by destroying it and rebuilding it bit by bit, quantum information by quantum information, I still am not convinced that's you, and that consciousness would go with it. Also, Kimomaki mentions the Hayflick limit. We can get into that as well when death and dying, which is called senescence. How a cell can only have a certain amount of times it can go through mitosis, and so many times it can split. And one of the things that limit cell reproduction is the Hayflick limit, which is basically on your telomeres. Every time the cell reproduces, those telomeres, those end caps on the chromosomes, get smaller and smaller, and so they can only really do this about 50 times, and then the cell just dies. It usually gets you can get a telomere fusion, which would happen in chromosome 12 and 13 with pan-troglodyte 1A, 1B, I believe it was. So remember, the whole humans have one, less duplex, or two less duplex, diploid, I guess. Sorry, diploid number, right? All other great apes have 48. We have 46, and why? Because there's chromosome fusion, because telomeres fuse together. So the Hayflick limit limits cell reproductions. Again, death, dying. Senescence, cells are so old that they cannot no longer replicate themselves to make more you. And so if the body starts dying where you cannot have a container for this consciousness, it seems to me, I tend to believe that the consciousness goes with it. I stand by my belief that there is no hell. I think hell is nonsense. I think hell is made up by people that wanted to argue for their position by threat. So I believe there is no such thing as like the Christian hell where you burn. That doesn't mean that there isn't some place out there that exists where the consciousness can go, but it certainly is not the, you're going to burn in hell kind of place.
We're actually actively dying now. We're not like at the end stages of it, but technically we are on the way to dying.
Well, yeah, everyone who's ever born is on the way to death, right? Because you cannot continually reproduce your cells and have these cell mitosis. So yeah, cells are going to die. It's just a matter of and even then, the Earth is not going to be here in 4-5 billion years, right? 3 billion years, even when the sun starts expand and become a red giant. So people that say they want to live forever, if you want to live forever, where the hell are you going to live? The universe is not going to be here one day. Eventually, it's all going to be black holes and stuff like that. So yeah, it's going to be very inhospitable to any kind of organic life. So I don't know what.
It's going to be a black hole,
so
definitely.
To me, death seems like a blessing if it is annihilation. If you are no longer in existence, that seems like a blessing, because who the hell wants to be around when there's no hospitable conditions to even have life as we know it, right, in a physical state? Let's see here. Noel says, as long as we are convinced it is in us to allow for fluctuation as well as, how would evolution differentiate between it being us or just seeming if it was? It couldn't. Evolution, I don't know how much it acts on consciousness. Again, every day when you wake up, your brain...
Through natural selection?
But natural selection acts upon a phenotype, right? What's the phenotype of consciousness, right? A phenotype is expression of genetics. So if your genes represent something and its gene is going to have some kind of expression that makes some kind of phenotype that the selective pressure is going to act upon, great. But I don't know how that would mean, what that mean in consciousness. I'm not that well versed in that. Obviously.
There's no consciousness gene as far as I know.
Yeah. Frank McAvoy says, hell is other people's. Satire. John Paul Satire. Satire. How do you pronounce his name? Is French. I can't speak French. But it's John Paul Satire. I don't know how to say it in French.
Spell it.
Well, it's Sartre. I've heard the finesse. I've heard the French
Salty?
pronunciation. No, it's
Sauté.
Sartre, I believe is the English pronunciation. But he was an existentialist, along with Nietzsche, along with Kierkegaard. They were one of the original existentialists. I think Kierkegaard was probably the most foremost existentialist. But that's an interesting segue, by the way, Frank, talking about existentialism. But we'll get into that. I promise we'll get back to existentialism, because I think that's very important in Death and Dying, and I'm glad you brought it up, about what it means to have value in our life and what it is to have give ourselves value rather than have some kind of external meaning for it. Because a lot of people try to find value in God because they think that life has no meaning if God doesn't exist. And I find that to be odd, because I don't think the question should be like what good is life, but what is a good life? You know, what does it mean to have a good life, rather than why is life good? I don't know if that's even a meaningful question. I think we give our own answers to
Good life or moral life?
Sartre. Yeah, Sartre. Or Sartre. Yeah, Sartre. Like Tray pronounced Sartre. Yeah, Sartre. I hate French words. Yeah, I know who John Paul Sartre is. I always hear it in the French, and they say it with this weird French accent that I can't do. Sartre, you know.
A good or moral life? Those are two different things. I mean, good and moral. I mean,
sure, but it raises the question: what's the benefit of having a moral life?
Yeah.
Now, I would argue that the benefit is that we all have to get along. We all have to exist in a society, and if everybody did what they want in accordance to their own beliefs about things, and they didn't care about anybody else, if they wanted to steal or pillage or whatever, or murder, society would collapse upon itself. So we've realized as a species that we cannot be like that. So I think it's a matter of necessity to survive in a society that we have moral agencies. And also think that people are somehow on the more innate level, we have an understanding of right and wrong. That's consciousness. And I think that is through evolutionary processes, that we just, through instinct, have some kind of intuition of right and wrong, called intuitionism.
I think being aware that we're aware is a strange concept. And I think it's hard, going back to what you were saying, Steve, with after, passing away, people use, they use different religion or whatever their beliefs are. I think it's hard for people to maybe come to terms with that there may not be anything after they pass. I think that's why this is such a profound topic. It's hard
Agreed.
for us to think. Just like, if you believe in a God, a lot of people can't wrap their heads around God has always existed, right? Because we always put time. We associate everything with time. So for something or a higher power or being to have always existed is really a tough concept as well.
Well, I think there's a very strong argument, not to get into temporal arguments, but I think there's a really strong argument to be made that a being that exists indefinitely, right? Past causal and future causal, cannot do anything in time with respect to our time. There would be no point in an infinite being where they could sit down and say, hey, I'm going to create man. I'm going to create the universe. I'm going to create Earth. There'd be no time period for that. It doesn't make any sense. It's like if you have an infinite line, right, of real numbers, it's all of a sudden, this arbitrary stop at a certain point and say from here on out, we're going to call this 0, 1, 2, 3. And I'm just going to arbitrarily stop on that 0. But an infinite line that goes both ways doesn't have the ability to do that. There's no point where it's some being is going to reach 0 from past infinity up to infinity. You can't transverse infinity to infinity. So if God is infinite, past and future, where in time can he do anything? Now, of course, people argue a theory of time, which would be William Craig's point of view, but I don't think that necessarily gets you out of the problem. I think that B theory of time is what most physicists would say, and that past, present, future all exist in some capacity at the same time. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. But I think I have a problem with that, because again, if we exist after we die in some form of consciousness, it wouldn't be understanding of one, temporally, how would that be, right? I mean, what does that mean to exist in a completely different time than what we are used to as time? And two, what would it even mean to be us? Do we have memories of our existence? And if so, what about people that only lived a few days or a few minutes? They don't have any memories of existence. What are they?
Didn't Einstein say that time existed so that everything didn't happen at once?
Yeah, that's one of the things, that time exists, so things that all happen at once, like time paradoxes and Doctor Who type things, right? But that doesn't mean that they don't have existence. Modern theory of physics is that the future and the past still exist in some capacity, right? It would make sense for a physicist to say dinosaurs still exist in physics. Because most physicists don't subscribe to what's called presentism. They don't think it's the only thing that exists is present. They still think that the future and past still exist somewhere, because there is no such thing as
the past is still happening as we're sitting here, and we just don't see it.
Yeah, because of relativity, right? Simultaneity is something that has proven that there really is no concept of what it means to be in the present, because your present is not the same as somebody else's present.
I think there's an issue with. I mean, I want to say so much about things that were said, but I think there's an issue with what even is the self. I think like the self is an illusion, because people can't even like really give me a definition of it. It seems like we have this illusion that we are like experiencing our experiences, and that there's something there other than our experiences that is experiencing.
Yeah,
them.
that's the issue.
What am I, or who am I?
What?
Because
the problem is,
God is trying to say, what am I, or who am I?
What?
Those are two different questions.
No, like what is
self?
What is
yeah?
the
When you say I,
self?
what do you mean? Like if you take away the experiences,
right?
There's nothing left. There's nothing there. But
Right.
we have the illusion that there's something there. That's the self that's experiencing the experiences.
Correct.
I kind of doesn't make sense, because we are a conglomeration of different things.
But I is
that are alive even.
But I is self-referential, right? When I say I'm self-referencing myself, and one, I'm presuming that I exist. This is the problem with the cogito, right? The cogito has an issue because Descartes has to assume self before he can even make an argument from there. And so
not just one thing though.
But when she's asking what is someone, if I say I, what is it that I'm referring to? What's the object of that pronoun I?
Yeah.
And if that object is consciousness, then what is the consciousness? Because again, all we seem to be are a collection of memories and experiences, which is qualia, which some other objects don't seem to have, right? The only thing we know that has qualia are things that have a substance called a brain. We don't know any other object that has qualia, unless you get, maybe panpsychism, maybe you can have qualia, I don't know. But I don't think that's a viable alternative. Just think that, okay, and one way to resolve this issue is to say that everything has ability to sense and ability to have sensations, because that makes really. Do we want to go that so far to say a rock has qualia? And panpsychic would, right? They're called monads. These are an individual unit of consciousness, and they would say that all existence, anything that has existence, has some form of consciousness in it.
They think even like an individual atom is conscious.
Correct.
Even memory can be finite. I can goldfish. They only have a short memory.
But they have a substrate to have that memory, right? They have a brain to do that with. A rock does not have any brain. Now, again, panpsychism is not something that can just be, hand waved away. There are some arguments for it, but they're not great arguments, and I think that is wrong. But it does resolve a lot of issues when it comes to the mind-body problem, what it means to be consciousness, and what Godless Girl's talking about. I, which again, what am I self referring to? And I, and that's a really deep question.
Well, I don't think that there is anything other than the consciousness. We just feel like there is.
Yeah,
and it's hard. Like I'm limited by language because I'm saying, I feel that, but I don't really think there is an I. There's just my consciousness.
Well, I think, okay, and I understand what you're saying. I think, look, we all know when we feel pain, right? That's called an incorrigible belief. If I believe I'm in pain, I am in pain. It's incorrigible. I cannot be wrong on that. If I am actually experiencing something. If I'm feeling something, like I've had headaches lately, and I say, oh my God, I have a headache. It's incorrigible that I cannot be wrong on that. Because it's a feeling that I have, but you can't feel that. You can't get into my head and feel it. So it's subjective, obviously. But I know I'm experiencing something. But the question is that's raised is, one, why am I experiencing something? What is doing the experiencing? And two, how does something that's physical translate that into some kind of sensation, to a mental state? Because if you think about it this way, physical, whether you accept physicalism or not, physical means the brain has some kind of what's called extensional properties to it. It means it extends in space-time. They call this extensional. And so the brain extends into multiple dimensions. It has width, it has length, it has depth. Maybe it has a temporal component, sure. But it does exist where you could physically point to it. It has some kind of ontological presence. The mind, however, though, isn't extensional in that. It has no length, units, measurement, nothing. It is non-extensional. So the mind-body problem says, okay, how does something that is extensional, that has defined parameters and an ontological presence, affect the mind? How does the mind change? How does it think? How does it reason? And of course, the converse. If I want to think about doing something, how does that thought, which is just an abstraction, translate into a physical action? If I want to drink my coffee here, how did that happen?
Isn't it all relative, Steve? I mean, people say perception is reality, right, to that individual.
But what's the causal relationship? What is the causal mechanism between my mental state, which is I believe that I want something to drink. Believe is an intentional verb. Something is being believed. Something is doing the believing. I believe that I want something to drink. Okay, 'cause I like my coffee. I believe I like my coffee. Why do I believe I like my coffee? Whatever. I don't know, but I like my coffee. But how did my belief turn into something that actually happened?
Well, there's also people that take that epiphenomenalism position, which is that we just feel like our mental states are causing physical things, but really they aren't causing anything. And like our consciousness is arising from the physical, but when we like think we're going to move our hand, it's not our like mental state causing that. It's just our body was doing it anyway. Yeah,
no, and I think that phenomenism has some arguments for it. That we recognize that our brain recognizes things before our mental state does. I mean that we recognize this consciously. A lot of things
the RFMI experiments.
Yeah, well, like
functioning FMI.
We recognize that muscles twitch and muscles react like milliseconds before reaction, hundreds of milliseconds before we recognize it, right? So, and plus, the way we perceive colors, the way we perceive things, also indicative of what we expect from epiphenomenalism. Because even our minds play trick on us. Even when we have optical illusions and color illusions.
We do it to ourselves. Yeah, we do it to ourselves all the time.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not against epiphenomenalism, but I do think that a lot of things are phenomenal. I got a lot of flack for this on the Non-Sequitur Show when I kept trying to explain to people I believe colors aren't real. And they're like, what do you mean by that, Steve? Are you an idiot? It's like, and first of all, color realism is, I think, the most dominant philosophical position. But basically, when you say colors aren't real, that just means that they have no actual real presence. They're just a phenomenon in your brain that your brain is trying to apprehend something, but they have no actual concreteness, no actual ontology. Just like the number 2 doesn't. I could understand the number 2. I can visualize it, but the number 2 has no realness to it. My dreams.
Well, let me ask you a question, Steve. Have you ever seen one of those like things where if you stare at the circle in the middle?
Sure.
And then like you for so long, and then you like look away, you still see like a red line or something. You know what I'm talking about?
Well, you see the negation of it, right? If I look at a negative and stare at it, then I look at a white wall, it'll show the positive image.
Right. Yeah. So when you say colors aren't real, when you see that image, do you make any kind of distinction between that image versus an image that's really there?
Well, one, we know the image isn't really there, right? It's just in our mind. It's phenomenological. And if that's the case, then again, colors don't really seem to have any kind of real presence. But same thing, it could raise the question: are dreams real? We can talk about dreams. We can talk about them as if they exist. I can tell you about a dream I had last night, right? So it has something that might be real in that context, but doesn't actually have any kind of ontological presence. Well, of course not. So we generally say dreams aren't real, although we can talk about them in a way as if they were real. Hi, Jamie.
Hey.
How are you?
Good, man. How are you doing?
And they change our lives a lot. I've had, when I was younger, I had night terrors, and they just They changed
Oh,
me
I had those too.
as a person.
Oh, I had night terrors. I had, I had
Yeah, they
lucid
literally
dreaming.
change your personality forever. Yeah,
But those things are internalized, right? I don't think that lucid dreaming is somebody leaving their body, right? The two ways of looking at it is one called astral projection, and the other way is out of body experience, as opposed to lucid dreaming. I believe lucid dreaming is internalized. I don't think you're actually doing anything outside of the brain. It's all contained inside the mind, right? But some people call that astral projection, and they believe they can actually talk to other people in that way. I don't think that they can. I've had people say that they can, but again, that's anecdotal evidence. But Jamie, you're a theist, right?
Yeah.
Obviously. So you believe that the brain, when the brain dies, the mind somehow continues, correct?
No.
No. Okay. So what is it? Okay. So as a Christian, what do you believe happens?
I think, I guess you could say I don't know. So I've been asking this around, and I've asked this inspiring philosophy, and no one seems to get what I'm saying. So maybe I'm saying it wrong, but I'm not sure if I'm exactly would be called a monist. Like metaphysically, I think another substance exists, obviously, because I believe in God, and I think he's a different substance, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
But I think humans.
It's called
regarding anthropology of humans, I would say I'm a monist or a physicalist. So
it's called neutral.
So I think
what goes to heaven when you die?
Well, hang on.
And is it you?
It's called neutral monism, is what you were talking about. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, neutral monism. But so as Brandon asked, when you die, is there something that goes somewhere?
So I don't imagine it that way, according to, because it's mainly a theological position based on scripture, but or the Bible, So, but if I have to ask, because it talks about like in the Bible, into your hands I commit my spirit. I just take that to mean something like God he has like some sort of pattern of who you are, based, like a snapshot of who you are, something like that. Maybe like, what do they call that?
Synonym?
No, so in other words, I think God just knows how to recreate you, essentially. Then.
Okay, so that goes back to Godless Girl's question on identity, right? What is it that makes us us? What is it that's different between us, as in myself sitting here talking to you, as opposed to after death, I'm sitting there talking to God? Or in theory, in some place where God exists.
There's all sorts of philosophical problems with thinking. Some people think if you don't persist, like your essence doesn't persist, then it wouldn't be you. It would be like a clone or something, And so,
right.
So I don't think that's really a problem. I know that there is philosophical issues there, but so I don't know. Like, what is it makes you you? I would say whatever that is, you could call that an essence. I just think it ceases to be aware and alive. And that's the question, I guess.
Yeah, it kind of goes into what's called essentialism.
Now, don't some people just believe that's DNA, right? That makes us the individual.
Nah, I don't think that.
It definitely has to be more than that.
Yeah, that's just a biological component that we of us, right? So it doesn't seem like DNA really explains consciousness. It doesn't.
No, I agree 100%. I meant as far as like mapping who we are or whatever. I would. Consciousness, like, I think gets referred to as like the soul, right? I mean, that's what some people would call the soul.
Some probably do. I don't know if they're synonymous, but
humans separated out the DNA and by our individual fingerprints and stuff. That's of our doing.
Right, but DNA only controls the biological components of you, the physical aspect.
Yeah.
Again, there might be control of mental. I don't know. I'm not a biologist, but I don't know what in genes, at least this way, the genes could control things like instinct. Obviously, instinct has to be passed down through the germline, right? That has to be somehow encoded into genetics.
Instinct?
Yeah. Instinct. Yeah, because instinct is passed down hereditary through the germline. And so we are born with certain instincts, which are biological imperatives. A baby is born knowing how to suckle. It is an instinct. Babies have an instinct of fear of falling. Almost, one of the most common things that everybody has when they're born initially is a fear of falling.
And babies can hold their breath too.
It's instinct. Again, instinct. Nobody has to teach you how to suckle or to hold your breath as a we're assuming, like, again, healthy, normal,
They say that's the reptilian subconscious, right?
Correct. The reptilian brain. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's
actually,
way back
Do I
here.
understand right that you're a Christian that
Is that the
isn't-
lymphatic brain?
doesn't believe in
Sorry,
doesn't believe in the afterlife? Is that what you said?
oh, I believe the hope of the Christian faith is the resurrection from the dead. So I just take that straightforwardly, I guess. So yeah, I don't think going to heaven is really what is intended in the text.
So what does it really mean?
I
though, then?
hear about those Christian annihilationists all the time, but I don't think I've ever actually encountered one
You
before.
have? Oh, yes, you have. His name is Nephilim Free.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Nephilim-
Yeah, he's actually
I like
doing-
Nephilim. I didn't know that was his position.
Nephilim is an annihilationist. Yes.
I tried to do a debate with him on this, and we were gonna do a debate because I forget if he believes in annihilation, and he also believes I forget how he looks at it. I'm not sure if so it's you actually should separate the intermediate, what they call the intermediate state, and then final punishment. But classically, certain groups have kind of put them together as in so when you die you're dead, but that doesn't, you can be a dualist in other words and believe after you die you go to heaven and still be an annihilationist technically.
Oh, because you go to heaven and then you get annihilated. If you're
They're just an intermediate state, and that's actually what the early church seemed to believe, is that people went to this holding place in the earth.
What'd be the point?
Good or bad. Yeah.
Seems like a waste of time, so to speak.
I
But okay, let me ask you guys this: if the Christian, let's say not Nephilim Free, right? Nephilim Free believes, and I can't believe I'm talking about Nephilim Free. I haven't talked about that dude in how many freaking years? It's like old school right here. We're going way back when now. But let's say that it is true that after you die, you are annihilated. You cease to exist, which I think that's pretty much my position. I cannot reason that we exist afterwards. And if I'm wrong on that, obviously we'll find out. But I mean, as of right now, I kind of believe that there's no life after death. But let's say he is right. Let's say that you no longer exist. Now, his reasoning might be wrong, but if we do all die and there's nothing afterwards, think about this. Nephilim Free was right.
Nobody will know.
Nobody will know. If that doesn't blow your mind, if that doesn't question all you know about reality to ever say Nephilim Free is right on something, wow, right? Now,
Yeah,
I happen to agree with him, but for different reasons, obviously.
Yeah, I couldn't
An eye
we couldn't
guy.
come together to debate because he had all these weird non-scholarly arguments regarding the text that I was trying to show him why some of his conclusions didn't make sense if he was going to argue from the Bible according to what scholars have said on it. Most scholars kind of see this differentiation between going to heaven and then the necessity of the resurrection from the dead and how that's a bodily resurrection and those types of things. And people it's like a common thing. I'll just won't go into it.
Nephi has a very bad habit of not understanding what he reads. This has been par for the course since he's was ever since he's been around. In fact, I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but it's funny. Godless Girl made me remember this. There was a time when we were talking about the chromosomal fusion, the pantroglodyte 1A and 1B gene, right? Which basically is why we have 46 chromosomes, a diploid number. And so he was trying to refute that. And he was finding all these papers that he could on the Robertsonian translocations and why they're detrimental and deleterious and all this nonsense, because he doesn't recognize the fact that these types of fusions happen quite frequently in organisms. They're non-deleterious as long as the information is still there. And so he found one paper on translocation. And it was...
Oh my goodness.
Do you remember this? Do you know where I'm going with this? Because you remember...
As soon as you brought this up, I had a flashback to before I moved from Washington, and I was listening to your show, and it all flooded back into my mind. And sure enough, this is what you were talking about. And this is funny.
Yeah, I'm not even joking. In real time, he was putting a paper on the screen, arguing they were all wrong because he had found a paper that he had read to show that translocation is harmful. And the paper,
was it geographical paper, and you just saw the title or something weird
Yeah, he just saw the title because the paper itself had nothing to do with genetics, had nothing to do with translocations of genetic material on a chromosome. What it had to do with translocation of wildlife from one location to another, which is detrimental to the wildlife. It was just equivocation. He just saw that word translocation and harmful, and then this is how Nephilim Free operates. He's just an absolute idiot, and he doesn't understand anything relating to these topics, and he just thinks he does in his brain that he's super, super intelligent. another. I know this is again sidetracked, but this is
I
funny
think
stuff,
people
guys.
are that can be that way in general a lot of the time, right? They're biased and then they just
Oh, sure.
feel smart.
I
and
disagree
get away
with
with
him,
it, you
but
know?
I like him.
Did you remember when he actually said that he wanted to have a debate with my friend Dr. Hugh Ross, which I again, I don't agree with Dr. Hugh Ross on a lot of things, but dude is really, really nice. And he is actually super smart. And he wanted to have a debate with Hugh saying that he can prove that the Big Bang never happened. And I'm like, oh, okay, Neffy. Prove to us that the Big Bang never happened. And his argument, and I'm not even joking here, his argument was because black holes don't explode.
Oh wow.
And I'm like, oh my God. This is what I'm saying. He doesn't have a clue about any of this stuff, right? And I did tell Hugh that. I did tell him that. And he was just like, okay. But the funny thing about Hugh is Hugh's autistic. And he doesn't really get when somebody's really being serious as not serious. He doesn't really understand some things like humor, like when it comes to that. I found it hilarious, but I think he was taking it a little more serious, and he's like, that's not correct kind of thing. I'm like,
Right.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's funny.
This one I got to talk about when I was in Fullerton, because I get to go to Fullerton in that area where you have reasons to believe. So I was up there a few times talking to him in real life.
It's entertaining. I like listening to him for some reason. I disagree with him, but he's an alright guy.
Oh yeah, I disagree with him on a lot of things. I mean, he believes at one time that UFOs were demons going across the sky. But I will give you his book, Improbable Planet, is well written. I happen to like it. I think it's well written. I think it doesn't make a super great argument, but I think the science, as far as I understand it, seems to be reasonably correct. And then he draws an inference, which he's allowed to do. But it's not like a lot of other books are just so out in left field. You're like, oh, look at the trees, God.
Yeah, and the trees do it for me, Steve. I have to admit, those I really like some I used to grow.
I like tree action, dude. I love tree action.
I know it's kind of a joke or a meme or whatever, but
it's a meme because it's true. But it's true that they've argued that before.
Yeah. What do you make of that whole thing with the UFOs, though? Because it seems like even some of the more intellectually, respectable Christians, let's say, that people recognize are like, do a lot of mainstream science or whatever.
Ridiculous.
What, like the fact that I guess you kind of, if you're going to be like a believer in the Bible and Christianity, etc., you have to say that, I think. Right?
I don't see how that follows at all. What do demons have to do with flying across space-time? It's just like weird.
I know, right?
that all came from the 70s and 60s and Project Blue Book, and back when a time where UFOs were, all over the place, because one, there was a lot of experimental aircraft, more so than ever. Two, people didn't know what a weather balloon was, or Project Mogul. Three, atmospheric conditions they didn't understand very well, like sprites, jets, elves, or just birds. So if you notice, UFOs sightings have gone down tremendously. And whenever you do see one, it's not really the greatest of picture. And it usually can be attributed to things like birds. There's very few astronomical phenomena, I think, that is just so unexplained. I've seen all those things from the Air Force and all this stuff, but there are people out there go, no, this is
Wait a minute, there was one in Phoenix in like 95 or 96.
But that was just triangles, and those were, and by the way, one of the sightings was, I believe, is flares. If they're actually doing military reconnaissance and military training, and they will put these flares up in the air that fall down in a very similar pattern.
It was in the city, though. It wasn't in the desert.
No, I saw that clip.
But it's right outside though. It's not that far from the city. They probably were flares or balloons. There's a whole bunch of different reasonable answers.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine how that happened on that same date, and that can't be associated with what people thought they saw.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of weird stuff about it.
But yeah, but we also know the SR-71 Blackbird used to be. People thought that was a UFO. The stealth bomber, the B-1 stealth bomber, that was people thought that, and that's a triangle type shape. But people don't understand. They attribute to things just because they want their brain to have a conclusion on something they could have some kind of concreteness to. And unfortunately, I find that to be a lack of critical thinking. There's no possible way I can look up the sky, see something that I don't understand, and go, oh, look, it's aliens. I cannot make that correlation. There's nothing to correlate there because I know nothing about aliens to make that correlation.
Any plane is going to have noise, too. I mean, it seems to me. That's the only thing about that. I would say, like, you can't really see a jet. I mean, unless it's way up there, I guess. But I mean, I saw a weird plane the other day. It had like it had to have been a high altitude, something they were running, but it had 4 plume jets behind it, or whatever you call them.
Well, they have some that have 4 engines, what are they?
It was going really fast. It was really high too. I wonder if it was something project they were doing or something. But it was clearly not an alien. So
yeah, like I said, I have no way to correlate that. And again, going back to like the topic, people talk about life after death. That's one of the reasons I was going to bring Nikki. But Nikki wanted to talk about ghost, and I was talking to Suzanne, no longer quivering about this very topic of people say they see ghost, and I'm like, well, how do you correlate ghost into a person? How do you correlate ghost to any kind of phenomenon that we understand? Like, okay, it can affect temperature. Why? It can affect electrical. Why? Is it a dead person? A person never lived? It is some other kind of entity? There's no possible way you can draw any correlation in any of this because we have no evidence of anything existing. One, we have evidence psychics are frauds by people that are doing these seances and mediumship. Every one of them, I believe, is a fraud. And so when you're talking about ghost, it raises the question, well, how do you know anything about this particular phenomenon? I believe these are actual phenomenons, sure, right? I mean, people experience things. I've experienced things that I've attributed at one time to ghosts. I no longer do. But they are phenomenon. But
right, maybe mental or psychological
correct.
Sort of thing, right? Yeah,
correct. And even could be natural phenomena we just don't quite understand. I mean, you see a shadow in off to the side or something like that. It could be an actual physical phenomenon that you're seeing. Slow Mo Panda for $5 says, I'm 38, disabled female from a religious family. I have been clinically dead twice, 45 minutes and 60 minutes before brought back before my DNR and I deconverted. Well, first of all, if you're clinically dead, there is no coming back from that. You cannot be clinically brain dead and come back. You could be dead, but there's different types of death in the medical profession. There's
like 10 to 15 minutes after you're out before you're clinically dead. I think.
Well, if your heart stops, you're dead. But for brain death to occur means the brain is no longer able to have, like I said, these ion channels have a differential, and they just open up, and you're no longer able to have any kind of neuron activity. And I'm not anywhere near somebody who's be talking about this stuff. I get this, but from what I understand, if you have no neuron activity in the brain, no electrical activity at all, like it is zero activity, not just below a threshold. And what happens is when you have an EEG on the brain, and they look at all these people that are dead, it's because the machine can't read that lower level of electrical impulse. It is so low, it's not registering on the machine. So they call it clinical death. But is it true brain death? No. Nobody has ever, that in my experience, has ever come back from actual brain death. Let's say somebody who's been declared dead, they're rotting on a table, their brain is in a jar, have them come back, and then I'll believe in life after death. Or the ability to come back. Yeah.
It's interesting because I tend to agree with you. We talk about life and death, and it's kind of like, it's not clear medically what constitutes for sure like totally being dead, right? You can go by brain activity, you can go by the heart, you could say you're not fully dead. I mean, even in the New Testament it talks about like they had this idea that it would take 4 days, not until the 4th day when you started to stink, where you like
then they do, right? Yeah. Well, there is something called the Lazarus syndrome, where people are so close to death where they appear to be dead, but they're not actually dead. And then, 2 days later, they're up and running again, so to speak.
Those scary stories about, like, when we were less advanced medically, like, they've opened up. Have you heard of that before? I think that's actually true. They opened up
psychiatric hospitals and stuff.
They weren't dead.
Yeah,
they buried where they buried people alive.
Yeah, well, that's why they would have a bell. They buried people with a bell for that very reason, because they would see claw marks recognizing the person was still alive when buried. So they had a bell that would be rung if you were buried alive. They actually really did do that.
Good Lord, that's the most frightening thing I can imagine.
Right? You're right. There's different degrees of what we consider to be death. But I'm talking about clinical death where you have an actual brain death. Nobody's ever come back from that. Yeah. So it's just because they say they're clinically dead. That could mean that the heart stopped, or it could mean that the EEG level, the impulses are so low that you're not measuring any delta waves or alpha or beta waves. Again, if anybody in the medical profession is out there, by all means, join us. But let's kind of go on with some of these comments, because I'm kind of curious about some of these.
Well, I'm skeptical of that.
Thank you for the super chat, by the way.
Claim in the live chat that she twice she was declared dead or whatever. Like, why? Like, it just seems more likely that somebody that says that on the internet is lying than that actually happened.
I'm willing to.
We can flatline and stay that way.
Yeah, I'm willing to give a benefit of
then come
doubt.
back.
There's been people that look, they've been in hospital, say they're dead, and they're like, oh, all of a sudden they're not dead because they misdiagnosed them as being dead. It can happen.
But it's happening. It's such a rare occurrence. It happening twice to the same person. It's like really improbable.
It is, but here's the thing: low probabilities happen all the time. There are people that win the lottery twice or 3 times. It can happen.
Can dead people have their blood delivering oxygen to other parts of the body and they're still dead? Because I wonder, like, seems like only with
For a while.
Well,
ability
but
to be
again,
dead for a long period of time and not have oxygen being carried around and not damage you.
Sure.
Like,
Your body may be able to go in low oxygen conditions and be in some kind of stasis. I mean, look at these tardigrades. Tardigrades can exist dead for all practical purposes in a state of desiccation, in a state of high ionization, radiation. They can live through just about anything and be, oh look, they're dead. They're dehydrated. They have no moisture. They have no oxygen going anywhere, and also they get rehydrated and reconstituted, and they're alive again. Now again, there's a limit to what can happen with that, but it is really blurring the line between life and death.
Yeah, but they don't have memories, bro. Like, show me one of those that like can recite the,
Well, sure, there's the less complexity, right? I mean, as us having memories, if we were brain dead for any period of time, it almost seems to be realistic to expect we wouldn't have all the memories. Memories are going to fade. As I understand memories, they're stored chemically in the brain. They're a very complex chemical relationship that I have no clue on whatsoever because it's something that I've really ever bothered to read because it's beyond my ability to do so. I know my limitations. But from when I talk about these, with experts on this particular field before, they tend to agree that memories are stored chemically, maybe even mechanical and chemical, what's it called, electrochemical. Or mechanical, electromechanical. And so once those pathways are no longer there, once those chemicals are no longer there, the memory is gone. It's gone forever. It's not just like a mapping where I think it's the hippocampus that does the mapping. Somebody can remind me. But if that
hippocampus.
Yeah, but if that's the case, then we can remap things. The hippocampus can remember where things are and form new pathways to those memories. But if the memory is destroyed chemically, then I don't know how you'd ever reproduce that unless there's redundancy. And the mind might have redundancies. Slow-mo Panda for another $5. Thank you for the super chat again. Said, I was found first time 27 years with no response or heartbeat, which again would be clinically dead back then. A lot of them just thought that death meant no heartbeat. It took them 40 minutes to get me in ER and shocked back into a normal rhythm, I assume. So she was she asystolic? Two times they shocked me, and that was hell. Yeah, well, yeah, that's all. When you get shocked with that many joules, it's going to hurt. I would not want to ever be shocked. My dad was shocked, and it I mean, my dad had heart problems. The first time they had a beat on his chest to get his heart going, and it left bruises. I mean, bruised. His chest looked like he'd been in a fight, and then they had to put a pacemaker in. But they did have to use the paddles too. And most of the time you're unconscious, so you don't feel it. If you were conscious and you felt those paddles, it would hurt like a son of a bitch.
Oh, man.
And as for death thing, there are some insects that can actually be frozen solid.
Sure.
And then melt and come back to life.
Same with fish, because they have natural chemicals in them that act as preserving agents, like an antifreeze, like propylene glycol, antifreeze. They have something similar to propylene glycol that will act as an anti-freezing agent, so the cells don't crystallize. Because what happens is when you, again, I'm not a medical person, so take this all grain of salt, man. I do like basic philosophy stuff, but as I understand cell biology, if the water in the cell starts to freeze, it produces crystals. Crystals can then damage the membrane of the wall, the nucleus, and DNA and things of that nature. So that's when you have cell problems. I don't know if
you can do that with humans yet, but I know.
No, we can. We can. We've actually had humans freeze and been able to preserve them from actually freezing the cell.
And come back to life?
No, not come back.
Let's start a campaign to unfreeze Walt Disney's head and throw it to us. Jeez.
Yeah, I don't think any of those are going to be viable. I don't think any of those are going to be viable. And why would you want to be?
No. I know.
I don't want that. There were experiments in Russia where they did bring back to life a dog head. I have it on my YouTube channel, and it's way, way old.
Yes,
but
and they also did experiments where they took a dog head and put it on another dog's body and had two-headed dogs. And by the way, there was by doing that led to a lot of breakthroughs in human operations as far as being a body transport, transportation
It better
of body
have.
parts. Yeah.
That story really pissed me off. I don't like that. That dog suffered.
Yeah, it did, and again, probably in the IDEA standard would be unethical. But as far as like learning how to do organ transplants, it was invaluable.
it followed science.
Yeah. So it sounds like she was. See, here's the thing I'd like to know, and again, I'm not doubting Slow Motion Panda. Again, I'm going to take what Slow Mo Panda is saying at heart, because it probably did happen to some degree she's talking about. But I want to know is, did she have asystolic, or was she have somehow like did she have a sinus rhythm that was shockable? Because to me, once you have an asystolic rhythm, it's nearly, I don't think it's impossible to come back from what I understand, but the chances of being shocked into a normal sinus rhythm when you're asystolic is, I don't know, like 1% maybe or something. I don't know. I looked it up a long time ago, but it's not high.
But
That line.
Steve,
That is,
but
yeah.
the thing is, look, you're what you said about the winning the lottery twice is true. Like, it's possible she's telling the truth. But if someone was in your live chat claiming that they had won the lottery twice, wouldn't you think it's more likely that they're just some idiot on the internet lying?
Well, I think the chances of having situations where you were declared dead, especially if you're an older person, where back then they were more likely to call you dead, whether you were and weren't, is not that exceptionally hard to swallow. But again, there have to be more details. And of course, do I think she was actually dead? Of course not. Or he, I'm sorry. I'm not sure. I don't want to misgender somebody, not on the NonSequitur Show.
Just say they.
So, they may not be they either. Don't call me they. But Slow Mo Panda, again, I don't think they were actually dead, right? To me, if you want to prove life after death and that you can come back from the dead at least, and that the consciousness does continue after death, make sure the brain is gone, and then reconstitute the brain and put the consciousness back in, and that would be amazing.
Well, you can flatline for several minutes and come back.
But notice it's your body still. Even in the Bible,
Right.
it was Jesus' body, the same body that was. That
Yeah, you're
came
still
back to
contained
life.
in your own body, right? I can't jump into somebody else's body. And also, when you flatline, it may also be because at the time, especially, the machinery, the
Not sensitive enough.
yeah, it wasn't. The machinery wasn't at a level to detect anything under at least a certain threshold.
Yeah, and it doesn't need to be, because they just need to
Possible.
know if you're actually alive or not, if you've lost consciousness or if you're in trouble.
Yeah. Well, again, though, there's really differentiations between what it means to be dead. And when I talk
Well,
about
that
clinical,
happens today too. People flatline and come back.
but flatline doesn't mean that you're brain dead.
Well,
You're technically dead in a sense, because they decided to define death in terms of heartbeat. But if you think about it, that would mean that between beats we're dead. If the heart just stopped beating for a few seconds, you're dead. But are you? No. I mean, so I don't.
Yeah,
think
the real proof that show after rigor mortis sets in, then
Correct.
I'm impressed.
Correct. I agree with you. If after rigor they can bring somebody back, oh my God, the medical journals will be blowing up. And I don't know if you ever. I'm sure many of you have felt rigor in something that has died. It is weird. Have you guys ever felt rigor?
Yes, unfortunately.
Yeah, that feeling you don't forget. That feeling of stiffness, where that consciousness is no longer there. It is just like wood. That's where it comes from. It is like a piece of driftwood. It is just something solid with no elasticity, no sensation, nothing. It is dense. It feels really. Rigor is something, like I said, that and the smell of death you don't forget either. And so, yeah, if somebody come back from rigor, I'd be very much impressed. So I don't think she was clinically, or he was clinically dead to that
Would you call
point.
that a miracle, Steve?
What's that?
Would you, if you saw a body that had rigor mortis, and then you know that it was the same body and the person came back to life, would you classify
It would probably, I would probably have to reevaluate my entire position on the supernatural at that point.
miraculous.
I would put that under a miracle, and at the very least, something that is so unexplainable to at least warrant the term miracle, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have an explanation that we're not aware of. Right?
Yeah.
But I would be willing to really reevaluate. Sure. Wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you already believe it's possible. Anyways.
Yeah, I just think miracles are one of those things too, right? That's hard to put your finger on. I've thought about this a lot. It's like, I don't tend to think it's magic. But then again, I don't think it's just like a freak events either, because I actually defend the idea that it's God's interaction in human affairs. But like, did Jesus, if Jesus fed the 5,000 with those fish, right? Did he create new fish out of nothing, or did he have to take molecules from the original creation and like pull them to make these fish? I tend to think that way. Like, is it a miracle? No. I mean, you could maybe explain it. I don't know.
Isn't that the difference between a miracle ex nihilo and a miracle ex machina?
I guess so.
Or ex materia. Ex materia. If God,
yeah, right.
Yeah, if God exists in something way where He has some kind of material, then somebody who argues creation ex materia would argue that God created the universe out of His own substance.
Right.
Yeah.
So and that's probably in the literature on over the years of discussion of whether it's ex nihilo or ex materia.
A lot of theists think that way too. It's not like it's some kind of bizarre Christian belief. Some Christians think it's ex nihilo. Some people think it's ex materia, and some people don't even know what the hell it is God created.
What's ex nihilo even mean? Is that magic?
Slow-mo Panda is a female. Okay, thank you, Slow-mo. And she says, let me get back to you real quick, Crystal. She says, first time I was not shockable, but I was put into a medical coma because they couldn't get me to wake up. I am not claiming life after death. I said the experience deconverted me. And that makes sense. No, I believe her. I really do. I really honestly believe that she's not trying to, put anything forward as far as like life after death or bullshit. I think that just she's explaining her situation that probably didn't happen to her. I'm not downing this. I think it's true. And it might be something experience that will change your position on something. Absolutely. Now she says deconverted. Did that mean that you went to more of a naturalistic perspective, to more of a physicalist perspective, something away from religion? Is that what you mean by deconverted?
She lost her belief after that? What, because she didn't have an experience? Is that what she's saying?
It's possible. And some people die, they don't see anything, right? And if we do see something, it doesn't necessarily mean that there is something afterwards anyways. It might just be your brain processing the process of dying. They say that, we are aware when we die, we are aware of this for a few seconds at least.
They say that the brain, like that white light that some people describe, that's actually like something going on in the brain that the brain does to some people before they die.
Yeah, it's almost weird that well, hang on. It might be weird to think that we might be conscious long enough to aware that we're dead. But at that point, I really do have to raise the question: if we're aware enough to know that we're dead, then we're not quite dead yet, but we're at that we're beyond the point of no return. I would imagine, like a black hole. You can't once you reach the event horizon, you're past the point of no return. So for clinical death, I think there's a point of no return. That even past that point, you might be aware of that you're going to die, but there's no way to come out of that. Just like there was no way to go past out of the event horizon black hole. You're doomed at that point. Once you're aware that you're inside the event horizon, you're screwed, right? There's no way out of that. Because all paths lead to the singularity. There's no way you can go. There's no direction you can go to get out of the black hole. Same thing with the mind. It would make sense that if you are dying to the point where you reach a certain threshold where you are still aware that you are dying, but you can't go past that. You can't get out of that. There's some kind of hard limit for that. That's an interesting.
Are you saying that it's like impossible for there to be some kind of technology eventually one day that could take like a 100-year-old frozen body and bring the brain back to life?
I don't think I doubt it. I seriously do. Especially if something's been frozen with the technology we've had now, it wouldn't be something that's viable. Maybe in 1,000 years might we have the technology to do it? Possible, sure. But again, why would you want to? But even then, you're only prolonging something. You're only prolonging the inevitable, right? Because inevitably that brain is going to die. There's just no other possibility, right? I mean, there's this physically speaking. Everything that ever lives has to die. That's
even protons. They say most people think will decay. I think
Yeah, well, first of all, these are nomological laws, right? The nomological law is that, biologically speaking, if you're born, you must die. And for a proton, it's a proton in free space, by the way, right? An unbounded proton is not the same as a bounded proton. So an unbounded proton may exist forever, but I think that they probably do decay, but it's somewhere upwards of like 10 to the 31st power a time. It's some ungodly number, 10 to the 30th, 10 to the 31st. But I do think that free protons eventually do decay, but that's one of the millennium problems, if I'm not mistaken, whether free protons decay, unbounded protons. But even still, even if they didn't decay, eventually everything will just be a state of high entropy. The universe will be in a condition where it's at thermal equilibrium at the highest entropic state, and it'd just be essentially one big black hole, and it'd just be nothing. And so this
Have you heard Penrose talk about his theories on about this kind of stuff?
Yeah, Roger Penrose has what's called objective orchestrated reductionism. Yeah,
where everything breaks down to the point where like time wouldn't really be passing anymore. But is that what is that? I haven't heard that.
Well, no, there's a couple in ORC. It's basically you have these microtubules in your brain, and these microtubules have quantum states, and these quantum states arise the consciousness. So consciousness can be derived from quantum mechanics, possibly, right? There is what's even called quantum consciousness. And there might be some integral link between consciousness and quantum mechanics. We're finding out that quantum is pervasive and everywhere. Quantum mechanics seems to be the driving thing of reality. And we also seem to recognize now that all of reality seems to be quantified in some way, right? It's not some kind of contiguous spectrum of things. It's not some kind of, unbroken up things. It is discrete things that we see, and then they're just slammed together as it appears to be contiguous. Just like, a video. If you have 30 frames per second, it looks contiguous. And if you have 60 frames per second, it looks even more contiguous. But you start dropping down to 2 frames a second, then you can see the breaks. But they're still individual points in time. That's called the Planck time, right? Planck times are just...
Yeah, but are they atoms or is there just fields? I think either way you can sub that idea that you're talking about.
What is an atom? I mean, what is a particle but a fluctuation in a quantum field, right? All particles are quantum fluctuations in a field. Electrons, you have the electron field. Higgs boson, you have the Higgs field. Everything... Are you an idealist, Steve, or what? No. I'm not an idealist, but I got to tell you, there are some interesting points of idealism. If we're talking about what it is to be consciousness and what it is to have an actual reality, what is that actual reality besides what our mind is processing and our mind is apprehending? Even though we are biologically limited by our filters, we are existing in a biological machine that has to filter out things about reality. It has how we apprehend reality around us, and the way reality might actually be. I don't think we have direct access to that. I'm not a direct realist. So,
well, who's driving that? Who's driving that car there? You're talking about almost like a dualist for a second.
Not necessarily. I think that you can have you can have an approach about monism about that. But I mean, again, though, our existence is in of itself how we are perceiving reality, and reality might be completely different from what we are perceiving because we even know optical illusions, color perception. Simultaneity itself, quantum entanglement, all these things show what we used to think 100 years ago about reality isn't the case. And so it does get into things like holographic principle and simulation theory and things that are just mind-blowing.
I like the holographic principle. I love that idea.
Oh yeah, I definitely believe the holographic principle. And it's weird when you tell people, yeah, well, we're essentially a hologram, and they're like, you're an idiot, and it's like, oh Jesus, this is actual real basic physics. Right, and this was only really manifested in the last couple decades. I think it was really Leonard Susskind that really put forth the idea of the holographic principle. I think it was him that actually was it him that was in Stanford that he was looking at a hologram and said, here you have a hologram of a three-dimensional object or image from a two-dimensional encoding of stuff. Why wouldn't reality be all like that? If all the things that fall into a black hole are encoded on the
surface of
the event horizon, then everything that goes in that black hole does still exist informationally
on the surface.
Right, in qubits, right, would be Planck lengths, so it'd be LP
times
LP. They're called qubits.
I thought he called them voxels or volumized pixels.
I've heard the term voxel as well, but I call them qubits because the way I remember information.
I love that. Qubits is even better.
One qubit is the square of the length of Planck length times itself. So you have the Planck length, and you times that by yourself, like you would have 8 times b for a square, because the square has 4 sides, right? And they're 2 sides are the same. And so to square something, to get the area, it's just length times width. So you have Planck length of the width, Planck length by the height, which is just, what is it, negative 10 to the negative 43rd times 10 to the negative third. That's 1 qubit. That stores 1 bit of information. So all the things that have ever fallen into that black hole is encoded in qubits, which is on the surface area of the black hole. Same thing with the universe. But here's the interesting part. I know this is getting off topic, but I happen to like this stuff. But Jamie, here's the interesting part. In information theory, in that information is neither created nor destroyed, it is just changed into a high entropic state. Because if you fell into a black hole, okay, you would still be on that surface area of the black hole, but you would be in a very, very, very high entropic state. You'd be randomized, obliterated, so to speak. Right? You agree with that? Think about spaghettification.
Torn apart.
You'd be torn apart by tidal forces, spaghettification. And the forces are so great that you're literally, as you're going into a black hole, you're being strung out and you're being smeared on the surface. Okay? But if that's the case, think about this, Jamie. If that's the case, then how the hell do you ever get inside the black hole? Because you're only being information on the outside. So how do you get inside the black hole? We know things fall through a black hole. We know things go into the event horizon. So how could it be that you're stored on the outside? This was actually a very, very tough question that was debated between Leonard Susskind and Stephen Hawking. Susskind won, by the way. You want to know the answer? If you fell into a black hole, are you smeared and destroyed, or do you just fall through like you didn't even notice? Because in reality, if a black hole is big enough, you won't be spaghettified. You'll fall in, and you won't even notice. You'll be like, "This is cool," for at least a few seconds, and then you're screwed. But initially, when you fall into a black hole, a big one, like what is it, TON 613, I think is the biggest, something like 60 billion times the size of the sun. This is big. You wouldn't even notice if you fell through the event horizon. But according to gravitational mechanics called ER, you would actually just be smeared around it. The quantum aspect, you'd be smeared, but general relativity allows you to go through. So, which is it? It's one or the other, supposedly, but the answer is it's both. You exist, and this is another thing that really goes into life and death. If you were actually to do this experiment and fall into a black hole, there'd be 2 states of you. One state where you fell through and you're conscious and you're perfectly fine, and in another state, to an outside observer, even if you neglect the spaghettification, you would never actually enter this black hole. All you would be is redshifted, right? Your light would be more and more redshifted as you get more encoded on the surface area of the black hole. Because all the information everything that's ever fallen into the black hole is encoded on that event horizon. So,
don't they say time would pass for you normally too, though?
Yes.
But not for those observing it, though. It would be frozen in time, right?
Because what happens after you go into the event horizon, space-time actually starts tilting. If you look at a Minkowski diagram, it actually starts to change. So as you go nearer and nearer and nearer, your light cone goes this way. So you're actually more traveling through time as you is for space, but to you don't notice the difference. But to outside observer, you're traveling very, very, very slow. You're being redshifted to oblivion. But here's a state where you're in a situation where, under one theory, you're dead, you're smeared, you're informationalized, and by the way, this produces heat. When you are encoded on that black hole and you are somehow information stored on those qubits, information produces heat. This is entropy. Entropy is unused heat. Entropy is literally unused heat or hidden information about that system of you. So we know that black holes have this entropic state. And so if that's the case, then it should be really, 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 really hot around the event horizon black hole. This was called the firewall paradox, because it would state that if you were to fall in a black hole, you should be incinerated because the information being encoded on there is so hot, it's going to obliterate you. But according to classical physics, you should just fall straight through. right? So which is it? Either you fall through or you burn up. But the reality is, both happens. This really blows your mind about what happens to the consciousness then. If both
when is it? Where is it?
Yeah. It really, this is what I'm saying. Physicality doesn't
portion of time is a problem for me too. That whole idea, like,
and by the way, no, April, it is two states. It is, if you look at the equation, and again, the math is beyond me. I do kind of basically understand the equations to some degree. I'm going to say, okay, deals with the Riemann curvature. This deals with the curvature of space-time. This deals with the cosmological constant and things of that nature, which is the energy density. But here's the interesting part. There's a paper a long time ago called the EPR paradox. Ever read that? Einstein, Pulaski, Rosenthal. And by the way, I don't know how we got on this from death and dying, but we'll go with it because, again, you're going to fall in a black hole, you're going to die, right? Eventually, you're going to die somehow. But Einstein, Pulaski, Rosenthal mathematically derived that you could have wormholes in space-time, that you could have connectivity between black holes, if they're entangled. And then ER, which is the Einstein-Rosen, came up with the general equations for relativity to this. So quantum mechanics allows for these entanglement, and so does general relativity. So it's called ER equals EPR. So if you ever see ER equals EPR, it means that relativity, ER, Einstein's relativity, or Einstein-Rosen is what it stands for, is also the same as Einstein-Pulaski-Rosen. Einstein-Pulaski-Rosen, yeah. Which means basically that quantum entanglement is the same thing as a wormhole in general relativity. How bizarre is that? Yeah.
That's cool,
right?
Because that's kind of like this. Well, they didn't think they were. They thought it was one or the other for a long time, didn't they? Or it's just a different way of getting to the same.
Yeah, well, I don't think we had any idea that the complexities of entanglement until the last decade or two, because entanglement really throws a wrench, I think, in consciousness. This thing called quantum suicide, and so if people talk about life after death, it's going to be, I think, on a quantum informational level. And I don't think it has anything to do with God. I don't think it has anything to do with heaven. But at the same token, if someone dies and just say they're 2 months old, what experiences they have? What is being informationalized? So if we do continue, it's not going to be in a way that's conscious. Sure, it's information, but unless our understanding is so fundamentally skewed, I think that as of now, you just cease to be after death, because I don't have any way of even in the quantum realm to understand what it really means to have consciousness continue. And I think that it was Sean Carroll, if I'm not mistaken, that has actually kind of argued that due to entropy, due to quantum mechanics, life cannot continue after death. So
yeah, well, this is where it gets interesting too, because when I'm talking with somebody theologically, they want to bring up this idea that, like, well, you can't not exist, because then it wouldn't be you, like, without persistence. But it seems to me that's dumb. Like, the more like reasonable thing to think is, like, if there's a being that's a God and he has no limitations on, like, understanding particle placement down to the Planck level or whatever, like, to make an exact copy of you in some sense. I don't even, because I mean, obviously, like, I could let's say make an exact copy of you without arms and legs, and it's still going to be you. So, like, what's necessary to recreate or make somebody who had the exact experience of it being you? What does it mean to be you?
Again,
Reminder to drink water.
I don't know what Alex has been doing that lately. Alex has been giving us some reminders to drink water. Yeah, but this goes back to what God was saying about identity. If you had if everything was exactly the same about, like, for example, me, I had me, and I had next to me another me with all the physical attributes that are exactly the same, even down to the quantum level, which, by the way, is impossible because of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, right? So the quantum state, unless we're in superposition, obviously if we're in superposition, there's a relationship. But if we're not in superposition, it's an entirely different person that's having conscious thought. Would it still be me? The identity seems to change at that point. It's no longer me, it's him. But him is having the exact same thoughts as me, having the same feelings, having the same...
I say it's you. I say it's you.
How could that be, though?
The centers of consciousness. I just say it's you, and then you diverge from there, and you both think you were the original Steve.
No, I agree with you. Both of us would, right? I mean, I would
be you. Yeah,
I'd be the original, and the clone wouldn't. You couldn't tell the difference. Unless, again, maybe in some kind of quantum state, they are the same being. There's something called one electron universe, which kind of states there's only one electron in the universe, and it's just all the electrons in the universe are just manifestations of that one electron.
Yeah, that kind of the same thing. Well, what does Godless Girl think about that? What would she think? She's still there.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the physics and the quantum mechanics, so I'm just listening.
Well, what if we made a copy of you? Would that just might as well be two of you? Or do you think there's a problem?
That would break reality.
Oh, no. So I don't think that would be you. Like, what do they call it? Teletransportation? Like, if that was possible, you're really just making a copy of the person. So if I was about to go through a teletransport machine, I would think I was about to die.
Yeah, I think the same way. And by the way, this is one experiment that would really, really put this to the test. If they can do quantum teleportation, this is something that doesn't exist. It's not at the scale of molecular transportation, but again, doing a Gununcan thought experiment. If you had something even at a small level, which would require an ungodly amount of computational power, but let's just say,
but you could never transfer in any possible sense.
Well, hear me out. Let's say you have a very small organism, okay, that's alive. We'll call it a cell, a amoeba. Even to transport an amoeba would require an ungodly amount of computational power. But let's assume that you have that computational ability. If you were to transport that atom, or that amoeba, through a teleportation system, where it here and then you teleport it somewhere in space time, would it still be alive? If you could do that and it's still alive, that would be remarkable. That would really put it.
Well, what do you mean transport it though? Are we talking actually moving it, or are we talking exact copy?
Well, you're basically making a copy. I mean, teleportation is all copying.
What would be the criteria for saying it was the same thing or not? We'd have to have criteria.
Okay, if all the atoms are in think back to the dot matrix, right? Picture. If all the dots in that picture are in the exact same place, I have an exact replicant of the original. I have exact copy. There's no difference. The properties are the same, are they not? Putting aside the spatial temporal.
Who would evaluate it though, and from what perspective or what reference frame?
How many dots? If the dots are, if you have a picture that has 1,000 dots, and they're the exact same color,
agreed,
same position, they're the same image. There's no way to differentiate between the properties, because the properties are the same, except for spatial temporal location, obviously. But if I could take that image and transport it somewhere else, which can be done quantum mechanically, I'm just transporting the dots, but the image itself is just being reconstituted. But if you're doing that with a conscious being, does it reconstitute the consciousness from the emergent physical substrate?
That's the question.
If it does, that would be the question.
Then does it prove a soul exists, an immaterial soul?
It would be something more beneficial to theists. I would put that in a tick in a theist box if it did teleport the consciousness.
But then this is where I say no. There isn't a magic substance. If anything, it's just emerging the underlying systems that are stacked, or however you want to look at it, like some sort of emergent property from the interaction of different systems. That's how I look at it. I don't think some sort of huge, outside substance from magic land.
But if the physical substrate is exactly the same, the emergence should be the same. It should have the same consciousness.
Right. No, indeed. Yeah. And so I'm not I'm not even a non-reductive physicalist. I would say that's not identical. Like, your mind isn't identical to your brain, but I'm not exactly how to work all that out.
Well, the question is, does it map with the physicality of the brain? A physicalist would say that the brain is intricately linked to the physicality of the mind, such that if you have two exact brains, they should have exactly the same mental states.
Yeah, I guess I do believe that, I suppose. I could give you my thought experiment. I think is really interesting, because it's interesting how people answer it. I could probably do it really quick with you because you're smart. So.
Yeah, go ahead. But real quick, somebody had mentioned Cyril's Chinese room. I'm not sure how that applies. The Cyril's Chinese room was a very interesting experiment dealing with does a system know what it's doing merely if it's doing these algorithmic functions? Does it actually have any kind of intelligence of what it's actually doing? Or it's just going
Oh
through the
yes, like the
motions?
Chinese characters being passed under the door, right?
Right. That's
Yeah.
Cyril's that's Chinese room, right? That's the same thing.
Yes, yes, that's kind of my thought experiment is like that. So,
Yeah. I mean, I get what he's trying to argue. Whether are we just a collection of algorithms going through the motion, or do we actually understand what's being processed? But go ahead.
I think we are just something like that. But the beauty of it, that's what I like, is being a theist. I think that's what's so amazing. We look at from a theist perspective, right? We're looking at the world. We learn these intricate details about all the things about how it functions and the DNA molecule, and it's like, I say that gives glory to God, and that's where he can make something out of the stuff he made, and in such a way, put it together in such a way that you can have life in and of itself. So that's just how I look at it. I think that's to think, there's like this, there's this mind body problem. It's like, well, yeah, there's a mind soul problem too. That's even worse.
Well, I mean, the life is the fact that life exists is just an extension of the consciousness, right? Everything we know that has a consciousness is living. Unless you go to panpsychism, whatever. But I mean, as far as we understand consciousness, it has to take a living organism to do that. And again, what is life? Life is complicated. Life in this universe is amazing. It is remarkable, I think. I mean, I'm not one of those non-believers that doesn't look at life and go, oh my goodness, this is remarkable. I think life is absolutely mind-blowing how amazing it is. Does it lead me to a God? No. Do I go to this?
I think it's the best argument for God, to be honest.
I don't think it is, and the reason being is because God doesn't explain what the hell life is. It makes has no explanatory power, as they say. Because why did God create this? What was his reasoning? Why is life the way it is? Why is life only on this planet? Now, again, if we're the only life,
have you seen the female form? I mean, come on.
Well, okay, yeah, okay. Women demonstrate there's a God. I'll put that in the theist column. Shakira is proof of God. Okay, that's God exists because Shakira exists. I can give you that. But if we are the only conscious, sentient, and sapient beings, because I don't know any other. People might argue that whales and squids and octopus have some sapience. Okay, but I mean, to the extent that we have sapience is unique.
What's sapience?
Sapience is self-awareness. It's more than just sentience, the ability to feel things, right? Sentient beings feel things. You can feel pain. Sapients are aware of their own existence. Much higher level of cognitive thought. Right? As far as we know, humans are the only thing that have true sapience.
Sapiens would be like humanoid aliens would have sapiens or something, right?
Yeah, and some people can argue that other primates might have sapience, possibly, and I could go with, because they are so close to us. Orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, they might have a very, very primary, very basal sense of sapience that could be developed later on.
You don't have dogs, do you?
Yeah.
You do? Dogs exhibit some amazing.
Dogs are, I mean, there's a basic thing of sentience there, but I don't think dogs are fully aware of their own existence in the way that we are, right?
For sure. But I've seen dogs mourn for long periods.
Sure.
Go to their
elephants
grave and weep and suffer and shake and. Sorry to interrupt you, man.
Yeah. So I do think that. If you ever got to the point where we can communicate with like a primate other than us, where we can have an intelligent dialogue, would be amazing. Same thing we ever did find extraterrestrial life would be absolutely amazing, right? So.
Yeah, I don't mean to be stupid about it. I don't think dogs can they're thinking in language or something. I just mean it is kind of amazing sometimes when they exhibit really deeper emotional connections than you might have expected.
Oh, absolutely. I think. Look, I firmly believe that dogs are too good for us. I do. I'm one of those people that think that dogs are just. If God exists, dogs are a gift from God.
Yeah. Right.
But even still, they're not really what we consider to be a sapient as far as the level we are. But again, if other species got to that point, it would be amazing. But as we understand the reality as of now, we're the only true sapient, intelligent species of that degree in the known universe. In 90 billion light years of universe, or even beyond that, we have no information about any other race, which is pretty amazing. I think that is pretty telling, especially if life should be ubiquitous if life, since we know life is predicated upon complex organic chemistry, this is a no-brainer. We all understand that without organic chemistry, without carbon, you would not have life as we know it. Could it be based on silicon? Yeah, but the valency is a little bit different. But even still, it's still based on some kind of biochemistry. And so if you have water, you have, the molecular structure to have life. You have the amino acids, you have the minerals, you have the, the electrolytes. You have all these things that needed for life to exist. Life should be ubiquitous. We should be finding it everywhere. But we're not. Which of
it's
course,
almost like the very creation of the universe and the particles were made in such a way that life could exist, but yet in such a way that wasn't
unique,
automatically necessary. It's almost like there's like this God thing going on.
Well, and again, I will put that a little bit more in the theist column for arguendo purposes. For by the way, for arguendo is redundant. It's just arguendo. But I always do that. It's just arguendo. Because as you note, because you have organic chemistry, because you have DNA, because you have biochemistry that is conducive to life on the earth, under these weird harsh conditions, life seems to want to thrive. Life finds a way, as they say in Jurassic Park. So we should expect to find not only just microbial life on other planets in harsh conditions, but advanced life as well. And the fact we don't, of course, goes to the Fermi paradox. Whether we're the first emergent life, all other civilizations have been destroyed, or they're just so far away that we cannot communicate with them, or they don't want to communicate with us. But that is
the light travel problem kind of separates us in such a way that, like, I think people conceive of this idea that planets are at the same moment in time, and but the light cone from the Earth is from our first communication is it's just not even a hair out there. You know what I mean? So that's kind of interesting too.
Oh yeah, we can only be. We can only
where we are and when we are.
Yeah, we can only. I mean, we've only been broadcasting. Let's just say since the I don't know, 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever. I mean, radio communication, right? We'll go with 100 years of radio communication. That means that the electromagnetic radiation can only have gone a distance of 100 light years, right? If traveling at the speed of light, which is pretty localized. I mean, would have reached Alpha Centauri by now? Of course, that's only 4.4 light years away. So if there's life on Alpha Proxima, which there might be, there it could be habitable conditions, even though Alpha Proxima B always faces the same side of to their star. There might be a habitable region somewhere in the middle ground, right? Because if one side is boiling, not very promising, but obviously there has to be a habitable region, because on one side is boiling and the other side is freezing. So somewhere there's a temperate zone, even though it's a very small band, because it's the planet is not rotating any longer.
But that's the nearest star. I mean,
right.
This is like we're talking in the galaxy. It's still you could ask the question by the time we travel to any even semi small ratio of stars in our galaxy, the amount of time that will go by, although it does seem, so you could ask the question how many Earths, because even the point we are, the position in the galaxy, it seems to me is a necessary attribute for life to emerge. Then you have
well, yeah, because we have to be look, if we were any closer to some gamma ray burst, we would have been dead. And there have been gamma ray bursts that have been detrimental to Earth, that has affected the Earth considerably and actually killed life on Earth. And if that was closer, we would have been screwed completely. It just incinerated the planet. So everything seems to be balanced in a way that life not only can get through these harsh things. There's been 4 or 5 cataclysmic events of life that should have destroyed it all. That life seems to want to thrive through it.
Yeah. Hey man, are you familiar with the channel Isaac Arthur?
Yeah, I've had him on the show.
You have? I love that channel.
Yeah, Isaac Arthur has been on the NonSequitur Show.
I love his channel.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah.
There's one. I've seen a lot of the episodes or whatever, but he's pretty cool too. I've been that persistent, annoying, young Earth creationist type thing. Although I don't show it, I don't necessarily push that kind of thing or anything. But there's one where he talks about immortality and through technology, and that one really is just thinking how if we were to advance technologically and expand lifespans and reduce death and how that would change society. But it made me think you still have the issue of like the universe coming to an end and all that.
Yeah.
But like think about as you reduced death and expanded life length, like on the earth, and you had less children, let's say, and it kind of shifted into that sort of, societal norm or whatever, you would still have people dying. They would just be few and far between. But think of the tragedy it would be when people did die as their lifespans expanded and like the death toll like lessened, like as that went in both directions, more and more and more. You'd still have deaths, and it would make death that much more of a tragedy.
Yeah, I agree. And it's called, by the way, it's called Futurism and Transhumanism. I have a book here written from a friend of mine. His name was he's not dead, but Dr. Fazal Rana. Great guy from Reasons to Believe. He wrote a book on transhumanism 2.0. I have a signed copy. I think he signed it. I'm pretty sure he signed it. It's very interesting because it talks about exactly what you're talking about overcoming the senescence of cells, overcoming the Hayflick limit, overcoming cell death and pre-programmed apoptosis. Because all cells eventually die, right? Cells have to go through this process of apoptosis and just dying. It's one thing to prevent cancer, right? Cells, like when you get a sunburn, you're actually having cells die so they don't get cancers. Right. Yeah. So if they say if you live long enough, you're going to die of cancer. Because telomeres get shortened, they become carcinogenic. Again, not a medical person.
Whales don't get cancer.
Well, I think they say that whales.
Elephants.
No, they say that whales and sharks and things don't get cancer, but that's not true. I think it's just very, very less than what it is for other species, but they have a much higher resistance. But as far as I know, any biological organism that has cells that are unregulated that don't go through this apoptosis, that just have constant growth can get cancer.
It's inevitable, right?
It's inevitable, yeah.
That's going to be a mutation that a cell gets, and then just has that issue, right?
Somebody says I look like Bible thumping wingnut. Ooh, God no, I'm better looking than that dude. Come on.
Are you a Calvinist?
I'm a tulip. But I'm just going to go through these comments real quick so we can wrap it up. It is coming to the 2-hour mark. I was only going to go an hour, but this took a life of its own. So this person,
Steve, let me just say one thing real fast.
Sure.
About that.
Yeah, go ahead.
The only I don't think expanding lifespans is a good idea for that exact reason, because of the tragedy. Some people don't recover from deaths in their life as it is, but to reduce death that much and then to still experience death and tragedy would be unrecoverable for those. And if you were able to recover, it would maybe say something poorly about the human spirit in that sense. So I think the only hope would be sustainable eternal life, greater being like God.
Yeah, I don't know what eternal life would even consist of, though. Eternal life of what? And besides, and we'll put a pin on that because I'll finish it up with that. But because I want to talk about eternal persistence in a second. But this person says, yes, life continues after death. Animal plants feed on you and leave your stuff and hopefully some of your knowledge. That's not what we mean by life after death. So that I don't think is a good answer. No one actually knows unless they're dead. We could all be on a way of thinking about flying spaghetti monster. But again, I don't think anybody has the answer. These are beliefs. Of course not. Don't be ridiculous. That's not an argument, Zebulon. I like Zebulon. But that's not an argument. The theists will argue that there is some kind of persistence. Yes, for a variety of reasons. For example, consider the following argument. Based on the dictates of common sense, it shows that physicalism is not true. I don't agree with that. But there must be something that is not physical. Physicalism. If physicalism is true, then know the physical makeup of something is to know that is the case. Yeah, I'm not going to get into that argument. I don't want to deal with that. But going back to what you said about the eternal aspect of living forever. Ever watch a show called The Good Place?
Not really.
All right. Spoiler alert. If you have not watched The Good Place, turn off the video for the next 2 minutes. Give you 30 seconds. 3, 2, 1. All right. So The Good Place explores this concept of what it would be like to live forever. And it basically would be eternal torment. It would be hell, even in heaven, because you have a conscience that exists forever, and you couldn't get out of that. You couldn't stop existing. You always be experiencing stuff. And you would experience everything at one point. There's been nothing left to experience. You've experienced it all. You would either have to reach some kind of omnipotence, which would become equivalent to God, or you'd be in your own hell. But even if you became omnipotent like God, what would they even mean? If you experience everything,
I know, right? I've thought of this. Yeah.
So the idea of an
eternal, ever moving towards God or something, right? You would never until you God.
That's the whole point of atheosis and becoming one with the divine, is you're becoming more knowledgeable and more experienced and things of that nature. But here's the thing, again, it would be seeming to me more humane for things to actually die and to cease to exist than continue forever in some kind of state that nobody has a clue what it is. I mean, everybody's guessing when it comes to heaven. I'm sorry, but even as a Christian, you're guessing. There's no way you're going to have any information about this. You read about it in the Bible, you read about it what people tell you, but you're still making a guess on it. You're still making some kind of inference. You have no direct information about what heaven actually is from heaven. And so to say that you're living forever in heaven, I don't know what that would mean. I don't know what it would be like other than eternal torment. So even heaven would be a form of hell, I would think, unless, again, the only other way out of this is that all these things are just so wrong in their think, going back to like eliminative materialism, going back to some kind of, to religious eliminative materialism, or some kind of approach where, you know what, it is so wrong, we are just way off base, and maybe we are living in a simulation.
Kill me now.
Yeah.
Just kill me now.
Yeah. A simulation theory would be we are way off base, right? If we actually were living in a simulation, we are way off base about how we perceive reality. And by the way, the Christians would be way off base even more so, right? So,
well, okay. So the way I would imagine it, something like this, heaven would be like a restoration. And so I look at it basically like we should think of it more as far as biblically speaking. I would say it's more like God's original idea. So like restored without, all the things that, Christians say about, death.
But why did he just do that in the first place? I mean, why did he make it?
Well, he did.
No, he
did. I would say
he allowed for a fallen state.
He did, indeed. In fact, I think he created the earth knowing what would happen. We could talk about it some other time. I guess.
We'll do that. We'll have another show on some of the Christian belief systems when it comes to like Adam and Eve. When it comes to
problem of evil,
Gnosticism, I'm fascinated by Gnosticism. And by the way, Gnosticism is not the same as Gnostic. If I hear one more person go, Gnostic and agnostic deal with knowledge, I'm going to just go, whoa!
Yeah, I know.
They're so... it just drives me nuts because Gnostic, again, sure, in the Greek relates to knowledge, and if you use the term that way, if you're speaking Greek and you wanted to say that you know something, you use the word Gnostic, sure. But in philosophy, the word Gnostic does not mean anything about knowledge. It is a very specific type of knowledge called the divine spark. So when they say no,
especially in the Christian history,
this.
Groups declared Gnostic,
right,
or groups declared heretical. And
correct.
I think the best definition would be, like, if you kind of not take a really dogmatic view of like from the church declares them as heretics or something, but just like the idea of the majority Christian thinkers and in the church, the majority said these guys were taking, they essentially had Christian beliefs, but then they flipped one or, at least one of the standard orthodox important doctrines, like a first order doctrine, flipped it upside down.
And become heretical, yeah. But you got to remember, Gnosticism was competing for Christianity in the 1st and 4th centuries after the Hellenistic period. So Gnosticism believed that Jesus was a messenger. They believed that he was the messenger of God.
Even the Savior.
Or even the Savior, but not of the God that created this planet, this universe. They differentiated. They believed that God created the heavens, but that God was called the unknown God, or the one true God. This is why when you read Gnostic writings, it always talks about the one true God, or the unknown God. Okay, when you hear that, a lot of people have heard the phrase the unknown God. This is what it's referring to. That Jesus was a messenger saying, hey, look, we live in a fallen world, but this world was created by a trickster God. That God was called Yaldabaoth, and that this isn't the true what's supposed to have happened. We come from another place in heaven called Plamora that the true God created, and this trickster God has been blinded.
The true light.
Right.
It makes the play Roma. Jesus is like the son of one of them, sort of thing. Sophia, all that stuff.
Well, Sophia was a lesser aeon. Yeah, Sophia was the syzygy of Jesus, the female counterpart in Gnosticism. And so the Sophia, or the Sophia Pistis, they believe that Sophia fell from grace because she wanted these emanations of her own. And she wanted to create and I guess rebelled against Yaldabaoth and fell from heaven. And when she did, she put into everybody what's called the divine spark. And so when people say, Romans 1:18 to 21, the Gnostics would have said that was Sophia's gift to us that we all knew of the true God, But that true God was not the creator of this particular universe. It was the creator of the heavens, and they were different. And so the aeons was this race of principalities that existed that had dominion over the heavens. They were relating to the planets, by the way. There's a lot of mythos relating to Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. These were the principalities. The spheres of heavens, they were called. So yeah, there's a lot of overlap. So early Christianity and Gnosticism were very competitive with each other. Obviously, Christianity won out, but there's a lot of overlap there.
Some say that now that people argued before that Christianity kind of came after, and now people are saying, well, no, Gnostics like kind of tried to glom on to Christianity and started using more of their lingo. I think it's a little bit of both, maybe, and then they got, it depends on how you want to look at like what survived and what was, I'm sure some of the Gnostic groups were. It's hard to say. I think we can know for sure exactly how that all played out, because obviously there's mystery religions going on before Christianity gets established, but then how do you separate the Judaism, and depending on what you think about how Judaism started and formed and its history and how much of it's true and how much of it's made up, or
you do agree though when people say gnosis deals with knowledge, they have a very, very rudimentary understanding, because they're not understanding that gnosis really it refers to a very specific type of knowledge, not epistemic knowledge, but knowledge of the esoteric nature of God, the divine spark. And again, this is what I'm saying when people just tell me, oh, Steve,
it just means knowing stuff.
Agnostic deals with knowledge. No, it doesn't. Stop it. You're wrong.
He says, I have no knowledge. That's what he's saying.
Yeah, exactly. Oops, I just beat my table. Anyways, man, I got to wrap it up. Thank you, Jamie. This was really interesting. This is what, I find these topics to be great on the Non-Sequitur Show. Yes, I'm going to be bringing in some guests, so don't worry, people. I will be reaching out to people. I will have more guests. But even when I don't, we can have a conversation. We can talk about difficult topic about death and dying, even because, again, these are things that people don't want to have to think about, right? They don't like having to recognize their own mortality and what it means. But I want people to think about it. I want people to recognize what it would mean, because that really does change your perspective on reality, in my opinion, because the way I think now is not the way I think ages ago. It's not even the way I thought 5 years ago. I've learned so much in the last 5 years, and unfortunately with people dying around me, that I've had to really evaluate things a lot differently than I did before. This is why you don't see me dealing with such this massively dishonestly and stupid people as much as I used to. I don't mind the average dumb idiot coming on the Non-Sequitur Show and laughing at flat earth. Don't get me wrong. But dishonesty, dealing with that, I no longer have the ability, the wherewithal, the interest to do so. I've shied away from that, and I don't mean like shy as like cowardice. I mean, it's just not something I want to waste my life doing. It's fine for people to do it, don't get me wrong. I did it for a very long time. But I think, Jamie, you of all people could realize, because you know the history of this channel, that I do not want to waste my life dealing with dishonest people. And so I just cut them all out. I want to have fun. I want to have topics of discussion. This was exactly what I like to talk about, these kinds of subjects. I think the Non-Sequitur Show is a perfect place for these things. And I expect to have many more topics of discussions just like this on difficult topics. So thanks, Jamie. I appreciate it.
Always available, man. It's always good to talk to you, man. And I appreciate you.
All right. Likewise, man. I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the StreamYards here. There we go. So anyways, thanks for watching, guys. I do appreciate it. If you guys have some comments, let me know what you guys think. If we could do a part 2 and you want to come up with a time, usually do this on Fridays, where you want to come on and you want to argue that life exists after death, that the mental states exist beyond the physical substrate, I would love to have that discussion with you. Please let me know. I also, on my other channel, my main channel, Steve McRae, I've been trying to discuss philosophy. And one of the big things lately has been on the phrase agnostic atheism. Answers and Reasons made a very, very good video on it. Joe made a very, very, very good video. And it bugs me that he's able to make videos like this. I hate it. I really hate it. I am envious. I really suck at making videos. And so when people make a good video, I'm like, damn. Because the quality of video is good, but the information in it is tight. The information, yes, he used a lot of my arguments. He knows this. But the information I happen to agree with. And so I'm looking for people that self-identify as agnostic atheists to come on my other channel and argue what the hell that even means. And I mean from an academic point of view, an intelligent point of view, a rational point of view, and a logical point of view. Don't just throw a dictionary my way and say agnostic means this, atheist means this. I'm not interested in that. That's puerile. That is jejune. That is like beyond, just naive, and it's grade school. I'm not interested in that. I want somebody to be able to come in and actually talk about the subject on a level that is consistent with what you would find at a college, introductory to philosophy course. And that includes logical annotations of these terms. And so if you're self-identified as an agnostic atheist, I want to have a part 2. I did have one person come on last time. Kevin was his name. He did an okay job, but I think he did a lot of mental gymnastics, and he wasn't understanding the logic that well, but he at least, I think, had to capitulate at some point because he was arguing the logic was wrong. And at that point, I think that you're done. But I want to put a shout out to anybody out there. Let people know, if you identify as agnostic atheist, I want to know why and what you mean by it, because I think it's silly. I think it's nonsensical. I think it's ambiguous. I think it's not. It's a nonsensical phrase. But if you can make sense of it using logical notation in a schema that works, I want to talk to, because to date nobody has. Not one single person has been able to do it. So put the feelers out there, guys. Help me out. Find me some agnostic atheist to talk to. But anyways, that wraps it up with this episode of the Non-Sequitur Show on death and dying. If you have suggestions of what you want to talk about, put it in the comment section. And I appreciate all my mods. Heat Shield, thank you for sticking around tonight. Thank you, April, for dropping by as well, and all my other mods. Thank you for becoming members of the channel. I appreciate it. Thank you, Kano, for modding, even though she she was doing other things, but Kano's always there somewhere in the background. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up, and I'm going to call it a night. So, good night, guys.